Imagine a powerful lion, wounded and weak, tricking a kind-hearted vulture with promises of a grand feast. But when the feast finally arrives, it hides a terrible truth. This is a story of trust, betrayal, and a lesson so dark that it was once meant for kings. Welcome to the Vulture's Feast, an ancient Indian folktale that still holds meaning today. Get ready to step into the lion's court, where deception rules and loyalty can cost you everything. Deep in the heart of a vast jungle, a mighty lion lay wounded. His body was covered in deep gashes from a fierce battle. Once the ruler of the forest, he was now too weak to hunt, too tired to even move. His golden mane, once shining with pride, was now dirty and matted with blood. Days passed, and the lion grew weaker. Hunger clawed at his belly, and pain burned through his body. He knew that if he did not heal soon, his rule over the jungle would end. But the lion was not only strong, he was clever, and so he came up with a plan. He let out a weak but commanding roar, calling out to the birds above. Among them was a vulture, an old, wise bird with sharp eyes and a kind heart. The vulture saw the great lion's suffering and, feeling pity, flew down to his side. "Mighty king," the vulture said, "you are wounded. How can I help?" The lion, with a pained sigh, whispered, "If you clean my wounds and help me heal, I promise you a feast greater than you have ever seen." The vulture hesitated. He knew lions were dangerous, but this one seemed weak, desperate, and the thought of a great feast was tempting. So, with his sharp beak, the vulture began carefully cleaning the lion's wounds. Days passed. The vulture stayed by the lion's side, tending to him, removing infected flesh, and keeping flies away. Slowly, the lion's strength began to return. His wounds healed, and his muscles regained their power. But as the lion grew stronger, the jungle grew silent. And deep in the vulture's heart, a strange feeling began to creep in. Something was not right. Days passed, and the lion grew stronger. His wounds began to close, his fur looked healthier, and his eyes regained their fierce glow. The vulture, pleased with his work, continued to stay beside the lion, convinced that he had gained the trust of the great beast. He believed that when the time came, the lion would keep his promise and give him a feast greater than anything he had ever tasted. The vulture was not a foolish bird. He had lived long and seen many things in the jungle. He knew that lions were not to be trusted easily. But the lion had been weak, helpless. He had spoken softly, with gratitude, thanking the vulture for his kindness. The vulture wanted to believe that this was a different kind of lion, one that understood the value of loyalty and kindness. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall trees, the vulture sat on a low branch near the lion's resting place. The air was heavy, filled with the distant cries of animals returning to their nests. The lion lay stretched on the ground, licking his now healed wounds. He sighed in satisfaction, then turned his great head toward the vulture. "You have been good to me," the lion said. His voice was strong again, filled with power. Because of you, I am alive. And now, as I promised, I will give you your reward. The vulture's heart leaped with excitement. He had waited patiently for this moment. He had ignored his own hunger while tending to the lion, believing that something greater was coming. The lion continued, his golden eyes fixed on the vulture. I have prepared a great feast for you, a banquet that only the most loyal friend deserves. Tonight, you will eat until you can eat no more. The vulture nodded eagerly, his sharp beak clicking in anticipation. He imagined a great meal, fresh meat, enough to last him for days. He flapped his wings and hopped closer, eager to see the promised feast. The lion stood up, his muscles rippling beneath his fur. He moved with the grace and strength of a true king, no longer the weak creature he had been before. He gestured with his paw toward a clearing just beyond the trees. Follow me, he said. The vulture followed without question. He was too excited to notice the way the jungle had gone silent, how even the wind seemed to have stopped. He did not see the hidden glint in the lion's eyes, nor did he sense the danger that was creeping closer with every step. When they reached the clearing, the lion stopped and pointed with his paw. The vulture looked down and saw the feast. It was exactly as the lion had promised. There was fresh meat laid out before him. The scent was rich and strong, filling the air with the promise of a meal unlike any other. The vulture's hunger roared inside him, and without hesitation, he flew down and began to eat. The lion watched in silence. His eyes never left the vulture as he tore into the meat, swallowing each bite greedily. The vulture had been patient. He had waited, believing in the lion's word. Now he was finally enjoying the reward he had been promised. But the lion's expression did not change. He stood still, calm, his tail flicking lazily behind him. There was something unsettling in his stillness, something strange in the way he observed the vulture's every movement. The vulture was too lost in his hunger to notice. He continued to eat, enjoying the richness of the meat, savoring every bite. He did not question where it had come from. He did not stop to wonder why the lion had been so silent. And then, as he swallowed another mouthful, something inside him shifted, a feeling he could not name, a sense of wrongness that came suddenly, like a cold wind through the trees. Something was not right. The vulture slowed his eating. His sharp beak, which had been tearing through the meat with hunger, now hesitated. His stomach was full, yet something felt wrong. The jungle around him was still too quiet. Not a single leaf rustled, not a single insect chirped. The only sound was his own breathing and the slow, steady breaths of the lion watching him. The vulture swallowed hard. A strange feeling settled in his chest, a tightness that was not from the food. He looked up at the lion, searching for reassurance, but the lion's face had not changed. His golden eyes were calm, almost amused, as if he were waiting for something. The vulture looked down at the remains of the feast. The meat had been fresh, tender, unlike anything he had tasted before. But now, in the dimming light, something caught his eye. Something small, something familiar, a shape that should not have been there. A claw, a bird's claw. The vulture's breath caught in his throat. His heart began to pound. His eyes moved quickly over the scattered bones, the torn flesh, the feathers that were mixed in with the remains. Feathers that were not from any ordinary animal. Feathers that looked just like his own. A terrible thought entered his mind, but he pushed it away. It could not be. It must not be. He forced himself to stay calm, but his body betrayed him. His wings trembled. His legs felt weak beneath him. Slowly he turned to the lion. His voice, which had been so strong before, came out as a whisper. What is this?" The lion did not answer at first. He simply watched. Then, after a long moment, he smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was not the smile of a friend. "You have enjoyed your meal, haven't you?" the lion said, his voice deep, steady. "A true feast, as I promised." The vulture's mind raced. He did not want to believe what his eyes had seen, what his heart already knew. His family, his kin, his own blood. "No," he breathed, shaking his head. "No, this is not." The lion took a slow step forward. His large paw pressed into the dirt, leaving deep marks in the ground. He was in no hurry. He had already won. "You helped me when I was weak," the lion said. "You cleaned my wounds. You kept me alive. You were useful." He took another step. But vultures are dangerous creatures. They wait. They watch. And one day, when a lion is no longer strong, they gather. They circle above him, waiting for him to fall. The vulture's wings twitched, his body tensed, but he did not move. He could not move. "You see," the lion continued, "I could not allow that to happen. A wise king does not leave threats behind. He does not let those who have seen his weakness live." He tilted his head slightly. "And so, I did what a king must do. I removed the danger before it could grow." The vulture's breath came in quick, shallow gasps. His mind screamed at him to run, to fly, to escape. But his legs would not move. The lion took another step, closer now. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "And you, my dear friend, have already eaten. There is nothing left to save." The vulture opened his beak, but no sound came out. The jungle, the world around him, seemed to close in. The truth, the horror of it, crashed over him like a wave. He had eaten his own kin, his family, his brothers, his sisters. He had feasted on them without knowing. And now, there was no way to undo what had been done. The lion watched, waiting for the moment the truth would finally sink in. And when it did, when he saw the vulture's wings droop, when he saw the light in his eyes fade, he smiled again. The jungle was silent once more. But this time it was not because of fear. It was because the lion had already won. The vulture felt the weight of the truth pressing down on him, heavier than anything he had ever known. His stomach, once full and satisfied, now twisted in agony. His own kin, he had eaten them, swallowed them without question, believing he was enjoying a reward. The thought made his entire body tremble. His wings felt weak, his legs shaky, as if they no longer belonged to him. The lion remained still, his golden eyes locked onto the vulture. He had no reason to move. The damage had already been done. There was nothing the vulture could do to change what had happened. The lion had planned everything carefully, leaving no room for escape, no space for doubt. He had waited for this exact moment, the moment the vulture would realize the truth, the moment the last bit of hope would leave his eyes. The vulture opened his beak again, trying to find words, but there was nothing to say. What words could undo what had been done? What plea could bring back those who were lost? He wanted to scream, but no sound came. He wanted to fly away, but his wings refused to move. The lion took a slow breath, then spoke, his voice deep and steady. "Now you see," he said almost in a whisper, "why you should never trust a lion." The vulture's body stiffened. He looked into the lion's eyes, searching for any sign of remorse, any hint that this had all been some cruel mistake. But there was none. The lion had meant every word. This was no accident. This was his plan from the start. A shiver ran through the vulture's feathers. How could he have been so blind? He had spent days caring for the lion, believing he was earning his trust. He had ignored the warnings in his own heart, the quiet voice that had told him to be careful. He had wanted to believe in the promise of the feast, in the idea that kindness could be repaid with kindness. But he had been wrong. So very wrong. The lion took another step forward, slow and deliberate. The ground beneath his massive paws barely made a sound. "You thought yourself clever," he said, "a vulture who could earn the favor of a king. But you forgot one thing." He tilted his head slightly. "A lion does not share his throne. He does not allow weakness near him. And most of all," his voice dropped lower, his golden eyes gleaming in the dim light, "a lion never forgets who is prey." The vulture's breath came in shallow, quick gasps. His mind raced, searching for a way out, a way to undo this nightmare. But the past could not be changed. His family was gone. His own beak had torn through their flesh. And now, the lion stood before him, stronger than ever, a king with nothing left to fear. A cold realization settled over him. This was never about a feast. This was never about trust. The lion had used him, just as he had planned. He had needed the vulture's help to heal, and once he was strong again, he had done what lions do best. He had ensured his own survival. The vulture felt sick. He wanted to spit out the food he had eaten, to rid himself of the terrible truth that now filled his body. But it was too late. The damage was done. He had walked into the lion's trap willingly, blinded by his own hunger, his own foolish belief that kindness would be rewarded. The lion exhaled slowly, his tail flicking behind him. He had no reason to attack. There was no need. The vulture was already broken, and that, more than anything, pleased him. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unbearable. The jungle remained still, as if the very trees and stones had witnessed the cruel lesson being taught. There was no sound of rustling leaves, no whisper of wind. Even the shadows seemed to hold their breath. The vulture knew what came next. He had seen it before in the eyes of dying animals in the final moments before a predator struck. The lion had no more use for him, and in the jungle those who were no longer useful did not live long. But the lion did not strike. He did not lunge forward or bare his fangs. Instead, he did something far worse. He smiled. A slow, knowing smile, filled with the satisfaction of victory. And then, without another word, he turned his back to the vulture and walked away. The vulture remained frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. The lion's footsteps faded into the distance, swallowed by the jungle, until only silence remained. He was alone, completely, utterly alone. And he would carry this truth with him forever. The jungle remained silent, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. The vulture stood motionless, his wings limp at his sides, his sharp talons curled into the dirt. The lion had walked away, disappearing into the shadows, leaving him with nothing but the weight of his own guilt. The truth pressed against his chest like a heavy stone. His family was gone. He had eaten them with his own beak, torn their flesh, swallowed their bodies. And now the lion, the one he had trusted, had left him behind, not as an act of mercy, but as something far worse, a punishment. The lion could have killed him. He could have ended it all with a single swipe of his mighty paw. But he had chosen not to. He had let the vulture live, knowing that the suffering of the truth would be more powerful than any wound. Death would have been quick, but this was far crueler. The vulture closed his eyes, but he could not escape. The images of the feast replayed in his mind, clear as fire. The taste of the meat, the smell of the blood, the feeling of his own satisfaction. All of it came back to him with unbearable force. How had he not seen it? How had he not realized? He had been blind, blinded by hunger, by trust, by foolishness. He had believed that helping the lion would secure his place beside a king. He had thought that a vulture and a lion could share power, that his loyalty would protect him. But the lion had taught him a lesson, one so sharp and cruel that it cut deeper than any claw. There was no place for a vulture in the court of a lion. The vulture opened his eyes again, staring at the remains of the feast. Bones, picked clean. A few scattered feathers, caught in the dirt. His family was gone, but their absence screamed louder than any sound. He had feasted, believing it was a gift, but it had been a curse. His wings trembled as he tried to move, but his body felt foreign to him. Every step was heavy, every breath slow and painful. His own reflection, if he could see it, would be unrecognizable. He was no longer the same vulture who had sat beside the lion, waiting eagerly for his reward. That vulture was gone, just like his family. And now what remained of him? The jungle stretched out before him, vast and endless, but for the first time in his life, it felt small, trapped. A world that had once been his hunting ground now felt like a prison. The sky above, which had always been his home, seemed impossibly far away. Where could he go? He could not return to his kind. There were no others left. He had betrayed them in the worst way possible, even if he had not known it at the time. And even if there were more vultures out there, how could he ever face them? How could he tell them what he had done? No, he could not go back. But he could not stay here either. Not in this place. Not where his family had died. Not where the lion had left him as nothing more than a broken shell. The lion had his kingdom. But what did the vulture have? Nothing. He had lost everything. And in losing everything, he had learned the most painful lesson of all. Power does not share. Trust is a weakness. And in the end, a vulture will always be a scavenger, never a king. The vulture stood alone in the fading light of the jungle. The remains of his family lay scattered before him, but they were no longer just bones and feathers. They were reminders of his foolishness, his blindness, his trust in a creature that had never seen him as anything more than a tool. The jungle, once alive with the sounds of birds, insects, and rustling leaves, seemed quieter now. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of something unseen. The vulture knew that the silence was not just around him. It was inside him too. Something had died within him, something he could never get back. For a long time he did not move. His wings, once strong, now hung limp at his sides. His sharp beak, the same beak that had picked apart the feast, felt foreign to him. His talons, meant to grip and hold, felt weak, as if they no longer had purpose. The lion had left him alive, but he had taken something far more valuable, his spirit. The vulture had spent his life believing that survival was about alliances, about being useful to those in power. He had thought that by helping the lion, he had secured his future. He had been willing to serve, to prove his worth, believing that loyalty would be rewarded. But the lion had taught him otherwise. Loyalty meant nothing to those who held power. Trust was a weakness, not a strength. The moment he had outlived his usefulness, he had been discarded, left to suffer in the ruin of his own choices. The lion had not killed him because he did not need to. The truth was a sharper weapon than any claw, and the lion had wielded it masterfully. The vulture's breath came slow and unsteady. He had only two choices now. He could remain here, lost in his grief, forever haunted by the weight of his mistake. He could let the guilt consume him, let the silence crush him until there was nothing left. Or he could leave, He could abandon this place, take to the sky, and carry this lesson with him. But to leave would mean something even harder. It would mean accepting the truth. It would mean knowing that he could never go back to who he was before. It would mean carrying this pain with him, letting it shape him into something new. The vulture's wings twitched. He looked up, his sharp eyes scanning the sky. The air above was still open, still waiting. The jungle may have betrayed him, but the sky had not. It remained untouched by the lion's cruelty. It was the one place where the lion could never follow. He spread his wings. The first few beats were weak, unsteady. His body was exhausted, weighed down by grief. But as he pushed harder, rising higher, the wind caught beneath him. The higher he went, the lighter he felt. The ground below blurred, the jungle shrinking beneath him. The lion had his kingdom, but the sky was endless. The vulture had lost everything, but he had gained something too. A truth far more valuable than any feast. He would never trust again. He would never bow to another's power. He would never make the same mistake. As the last traces of the jungle faded below him, the vulture flew on, carrying the lesson the lion had given him. A lesson written in betrayal, in blood, in the cruel feast that had changed him forever. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.